Hello, friends. I hope that you guys are all doing well, staying healthy, washing your hands, and all that jazz. Sorry that we can't be together in person, but today we are going to be going over the myth of Pygmalion and Galatea. As we have seen and discussed in previous classes, the story of George Bernard Shaw's Pygmalion has been recreated in both past and present art, film, and literature. Take a second and try and think of any modern adaptations of the play that you may have read about or seen. Some examples we see closely align with the original play, like My Fair Lady, whereas some take on a more broad adaptation, almost an appropriation of the play, films like Pretty Women or She's All That. Nonetheless, all of these adaptations did not originally come from George Bernard Shaw's play. If you trace back even further, the story actually comes from Greek mythology with the telling of Pygmalion and Galatea. So I'm going to give you guys a brief overview retelling of this myth. Our story begins with a man named Pygmalion. He was a famous sculptor with unique abilities and was admired throughout the world for his realistic and one-of-a-kind statues. However, he was also known for his cynic eye, partially because he was an artist, also just because of his personality. He only ever saw flaws in any woman that he ever met and decided it would be best to remain celibate. He never married or even thought of looking for love. Can you think of any evidence from the text that shows similarities between Pygmalion and Henry Higgins just based off that information alone? If we think back to one of the first acts, we hear Higgins discussing with the Colonel that when it comes to women, one wants to go one way while he wants to go the other, and they end up having to compromise and no one ends up happy. So Higgins has that same type of idea about love that Pygmalion did, where it's kind of not worth the trouble. And so he also decides to swear off finding marriage. So Pygmalion decided to travel to the island of Cyprus in search of the perfect stone to make his works appear to be made from ivory and look even more lifelike. On his journey, he was able to find the perfect block of marble that he detailed as being flawless. He decided to create his magnum opus, or like his great work that he would be forever known for, by edifying the perfect woman. So this statue of the perfect woman would not be like any woman that he saw on the streets. He believed that they were all vulgar and problematic, and the statue that he was going to build would exemplify someone who was young, beautiful, virginal. However, Pygmalion believed that his home didn't have a single woman who had these characteristics or could model for his work. So he had to create the image from his own mind and imagination. And so it truly was almost an unreachable expectation, yet complete perfection in his own eyes. As he began working on this project, he became completely consumed and obsessed with creating this masterpiece. He dedicated all of his time and life to the project. In the end, though, even though he did go a little crazy and become obsessed, his work was, in his eyes, perfect. He had never seen anything like it before and actually became enchanted by his own creation and gave it its own name, Galatea. The statue was so lifelike that Pygmalion often had to touch it to make sure that it wasn't a real woman. He slowly started to fall in love with the statue and would even do wild things like dress it up in silk, caress its face, isolate himself with it. Some retellings of the myth even said that he would put the statue next to him in bed while he went to sleep. After becoming so overcome with obsession with Galatea, he went to the temple of Aphrodite, who is the goddess of love and women, to pay tribute and plead his case. He begged to the goddess that he did not mean to offend her when he tried to avoid love earlier in his life. He even cried to her that he is now overcome by love and would do absolutely anything for a wife like Galatea. So Aphrodite was actually moved by Pygmalion's plea and saw a transformation in him and decided to transform Galatea as well. So when Pygmalion returned home from the temple of Aphrodite and went to touch his statue. He realized that it was transforming into a real woman. So Aphrodite gave the couple their blessing to get married, and they ended up spending the rest of their lives together and had a child who went on to conquer land in the name of Aphrodite. So as we go through this myth, I feel like it's pretty clear the alignment between the myth and George Bernard Shaw's play. While the myth is a little bit more drastic and has those elements of supernatural in it, the overall themes and motifs throughout it align very closely. As we discussed before, the myth inspired more than just the awesome play that we have been reading. It was also the inspiration for many poems and films. I have selected 3 different poems inspired by the myth of Pygmalion and Galatea for you to read. If you go onto Google Classroom, you will find a link to the 3 poems as well as a short worksheet with some questions to answer. I hope you guys are all doing great, feeling healthy. I miss you all, and have a great rest of the year.